GIS webinar for December. Particularly, the subject here is the Q&A with Samaritan's first response to Hurricane Helene. We're trying a little bit different format here. Typically, we usually have a presentation and then we have an open Q&A. We thought we'd try something different here because there's so many different parts of this story that you're going to hear in a few minutes with different people's perspectives. We thought, oh, this might be better as a panel discussion. So I appreciate Michael Bishop, who is the GIS manager at Samaritan's Purse and has been kind of the person who ties all of these pieces in Samaritan's Purse that you're going to hear about together. But certainly, it's as we'll hear, it's a team effort. So with that, Michael, maybe you could just give us an introduction to Samaritan's Purse and what your mission is.
Yeah, thanks.
Maybe
Mark.
Introduce yourself if I didn't.
Yeah, no.
Add anything.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Appreciate it. And hi, everyone. It's great to be a part of this and just explain a little bit more about us and help you learn a little bit more about Samaritan's Purse and what we do. Yeah, I am the GIS systems manager, sometimes known as the GIS manager, but it's a little bit of a nuance there. And so the system part obviously is the hardware and the software. And I do help with organizing the people as much as I can, but really what we have are multiple ministries in Samaritan's Purse. We call them ministries, but you can think of them as departments. So you heard from Peter. He's with North American Ministries. That is the North American wing of our disaster relief. Then we have projects, which is the international wing of disaster relief. So that's the separation there. And some of you are probably fully aware of Operation Christmas Child, which is going in full swing right now. Shoe boxes are being processed in our processing centers. So that's a part. We have donor ministries, Global Security Team, World Medical Mission. I'm probably forgetting some here. Help me, Peter, if I'm forgetting anything. I probably am. But the reality is that our mission is really to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ, and we do that in as many means as we possibly can, and that is through disaster relief, like I've mentioned, but really meeting the physical needs of people when they're in disaster, and then coming alongside them with a spiritual arm to lean on and really to spread the gospel by doing both the good works, the hands and feet of Jesus, but also telling them about the love that Jesus has for people. And what's interesting about our organization is we are very joined at the hip with the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association. You might know that our CEO is Franklin Graham, who is the son of Billy Graham. Franklin is also the CEO or the head of the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association. So our two organizations work side by side. In fact, in this disaster, the Helene hurricane disaster, we're very much side by side. And so chaplains from the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association go out and minister to people as we're ministering for their physical needs. So we really use all of the means possible to preach the gospel so that in the end, Jesus can come back and rescue us, the church, and his beloved. So that is the mission, the primary mission. And yeah, so we'll get into a little bit more of what we do. But yeah, primary mission is to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Great. Thank you, Michael. I appreciate that. It's a good overview. And I think maybe you could give us, just for some context, because I know many of us have heard about Hurricane Helene and the subsequent what became Storm Helene as it came across the U.S. But some folks, particularly our European colleagues, may not be as familiar with it. So maybe just in a quick summary, you could kind of tell us what happened. What was the crisis that kind of hit the U.S. and that Samaritan's Purse responded to?
Yeah, definitely. And I wanted to use a story map to kind of help this out. And I'm having a hard time finding our little, how do I share my screen thing? Here we go. Sharing my screen. Let's see if I can do this. Window. Yeah, that one right there. Share. There. Okay.
All right, great.
Let me minimize this. So obviously I have just a web map here, but I wanted to kind of talk about what happened with Helene and its special circumstances, especially for us and our response. Hurricane Helene made landfall in what's called the Big Bend region of Florida on September 26th as a Category 4 hurricane, which is just one below usually the largest. Like Hurricane Ian, I think was a 5, but this was one of the hardest hurricanes. It was the hardest, actually, the with the most energy to hit the Big Bend region of Florida. And so you can see here that swath. Oops, sorry about that. My mouse seems to be doing its own thing. Come back. All right, there we go. So these two areas that you see here are outlines of our response area, and this is kind of normal for us. Obviously, when a hurricane hits, we want to be in the disaster zone as quickly as we can, and so we were. I think we were pre-positioned and ready for that. And it really, both storm surge and high winds and all of that did the kind of the unfortunately normal damage that happens in a hurricane. Roofs ripped off, buildings toppled, flooding just excessive in the storm surge area. And maybe Peter can say a little bit more about that once we get to him. So that was September 26th. But the storm, as it weakened over the rest of the United States, hovered in. I can get to the right thing here. Let me see. Oh, come on. A little slow. I think it was here, wasn't it? Let me see.
Yes.
Here we go. So I have this other map, and hopefully you can see this. Does everybody see the special map that I'm showing here? Okay. So you can see on Friday and through Sunday, the hurricane actually became a tropical storm and hovered over central Tennessee, really close to Nashville, for 2 days. And so in that time period, it created such an amazing amount of rainfall that came down. I just moved to another map here that shows you the rainfall totals. And for those that don't know the geography of the United States, and I get it now, folks that are in Europe might not know, but you can see the outlines here of the states. So this is North Carolina here. Can you guys see my mouse moving, by the way?
Yes.
Okay. And then South Carolina, and then Eastern Tennessee. This is Tennessee right here, and Georgia right here. So we got Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Tennessee, which were the hardest hit by this parking of the storm. And so it just parked over our area. And if anyone's aware of this area, it is the Eastern Continental Divide. And the Eastern Continental Divide really is close to the border of North Carolina with Tennessee. It's a little bit on this side, but anyway, the rainfalls, because of the mountain uplift with the Appalachians, just dumped tons of rain into North Carolina over that 2-day period in the weekend. And for some reason, I can't zoom in anymore, but let me see. Maybe I can use this. Oh, there it goes. It's being a little slow because I'm actually on 2 machines here. So sorry about that. I wanted to show you some rainfall totals, but the reality is those red dots are in the 14 to 30 inch, and they're probably not going to come back, but that's okay. There was at least 14 to 30 inches of rain that fell in 2 days, which is just phenomenal. That's really almost the entire year's total of rain that this region gets, and came down in 2
Michael,
days.
for perspective for the Europeans, it's about 40 centimeters of rain.
Yeah, right. Thank you for the conversion. Appreciate that. Yeah, so in that area, which was just crazy, and I wanted to see if this takes off. Let's see if it does. So you can see here's just a picture of the hurricane as it moved through, and it doesn't look like much, but what happens is when a hurricane is spinning, it's pretty much spinning the moisture from the Atlantic into those areas. So we just had tons and tons of rain, totally unexpected. We did not think that this hurricane or this tropical storm would park over Tennessee for that long of a period, and it just created phenomenal amounts of flooding. And so unfortunately, the flooding was so phenomenal that it washed houses downstream, took out tons of buildings, killed over 200 people unawares, really, because it was in the early morning hours that it really started to show its teeth. And so people were unprepared and really not ready for what was going to happen. There was some warning, But unfortunately, that warning was so muted and people didn't really pay attention that people were caught unawares. And so many people were washed downstream, houses washed downstream, mud flows happened, sides of mountains fell down. So there was just tons and tons of things that happened adversely that affected so many people. And what's interesting, this area is really where Samaritan's Purse headquarters is at. We were called on Monday to all go to the staff were going to go to a local church where our DR units, our disaster response units, were set up, and so that's where it all began. And I realized that GIS was going to be important as we made our efforts, and so yeah, we can just continue the story from there. So hopefully
that's great. Yeah, thank you, Michael. That gives us a really good sense of crisis and the level of the crisis. And of course, that's what Samaritan's Purse, one of the areas that they shine in. And we're going to hear from different parts of Samaritan's Purse and how they responded. So I'm going to turn my next question over to Peter. Peter's with the North American Ministries part of Samaritan's Purse. Peter, maybe you could recap how many volunteers did you have respond to Helene, and kind of what was your experience in this?
Yeah, so my role is technology and data systems with our North American team, so supporting our disaster response, our rebuild teams. With kind of we have our volunteer sign-up website, so interfacing with our IT department that supports that for us, other kind of custom applications and projects to support our teams. GIS is one of those things. I get to work with Michael a lot on those projects, and very grateful for help from across the ministry during this time. So we had in the month of October, so the storm hit. We began responding on the 27th, I believe, of September. So October was really the biggest month of this response. Just in the month of October, we had somewhere in the neighborhood of 32,000 volunteers come out and serve with us. To put that in perspective, previously our annual high was in the 20,000 range for the entire year. So we went 1.5 times that in just the month of October. Incredibly blessed. It's our backyard. So we stood up 3 responses. Watauga County, or some surrounding counties, including Eastern Tennessee, Asheville, North Carolina, and Burnsville, North Carolina. So we served probably 8 or 9 counties. Through those 3 sites, we also had those sites in Georgia and Florida, also a site in Tampa that our Canadian affiliate office brought staff and equipment down and served in Tampa, where the wind, as you can see, the wind wasn't a direct hit, but storm surge was. And so they served there. So those were kind of our immediate responses to Helene specifically. Overall, to date, it looks like we are over 38,000 volunteers have served with us, and that's our model. At any of these sites, we probably, at any given time, we have 3 or 4 staff members, maybe a few more if it's particularly large, but it's a volunteer-driven model. We give folks the tools and resources, training they need. We have trained key volunteers that are leading teams and assessing for us and running heavy equipment. That is, let's see, that's a total of 588,000 volunteer hours across our Hurricane Helene responses. And we've been blessed, and this is a number kind of kept in partnership with the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association. And it's an opportunity to praise God for what he's done. It's a number that we can't always track, but that we know of. There are over 300 people that have come to faith in Jesus Christ through this response in one way or another. Local churches are following up with them, discipling them. We pray there are many more. Seeds were planted, seeds were watered, but that's always a blessing to see that impact.
That's great, Peter. Thank you for that. You said as Samaritan's Purse is set up as a volunteer model, but you had, as you said, 32,000 volunteers a month compared to the typical 20,000 in 1 year. How did you? What were some of the challenges you dealt with those volunteers, and what were some of your lessons learned?
We had some very large sites, very large days. We had several sites that for the first couple Saturdays are running more than 1,000 volunteers a day, and so just being able to pull on our site leadership team is what we call our key volunteers, as well as staff from different departments came in, jumped in, led teams for us, assessed work where normally we are, normally we're running maybe a couple hundred volunteers the first couple Saturdays. And so we're very blessed to be able to draw on some of our international response teams that we were able to activate. Just other staff from throughout the ministry who had some familiarity with our department, maybe have served with us before. Um, and so we're looking to build that bench, but we had some very fast growth in those areas to make sure we had a safe experience. We also made some changes on the volunteer management side just to enable volunteers to sign up for specific days to serve instead of just telling us, hey, we're going to come someday. And so our IT folks were great at supporting us. We turned around some pretty major website changes in about 8 days as part of this response.
That's great. Um, I've got a little bit of experience working with Samaritan's Purse and some other organizations with emergency response. There's always the emergency that hits. There's the safety of life and property and the response, and then you go into a phase recovery phase. So, can you tell us a bit about what Samaritan's Purse is doing? You guys aren't just parachuting in and then you're done in a month or something, right? You guys stay there and you help with rebuilding. Maybe you could talk a little bit. What does that mean, and what's going to happen in the future to these displaced people?
Absolutely. So we kind of divided into a disaster relief and a rebuild and recovery phases. So that disaster relief phase, we're helping folks cut trees out of their driveways, put a tarp on a roof, mud out their home, take out wet sheetrock and insulation after a flood situation, things along those lines. So that's disaster relief. Here we've been able to help folks make driveways accessible again as well with gravel and heavy equipment and things like that as well. So being in our own backyard has given us the opportunity to expand that scope a little bit. And we're moving into that rebuild and recovery phase, even as we still have disaster relief teams working. We have folks call in, we'll go to them, and our commitment is anyone that we take a request and say, we think, yes, we're going to be able to help you. Of course, there's scope issues, and there's sometimes it turns out to be something that our volunteers are just not able to do. But if we're able to do it, if we've made that commitment, we're going to stay until that commitment's done. And so we just wrapped up our Watauga disaster relief side. We're wrapping up one of our other sites, and then Asheville and our Valdosta, Georgia site in Tampa, Florida, they're still going on the disaster relief side as we start the rebuild side. And so Samaritan's Purse will be providing new manufactured homes for folks who lost theirs. We'll be rebuilding from the ground up stick-built homes, repairing stick-built homes as well. And so we have a beneficiary services team that's doing all the casework and reaching out to the folks that we have served on the disaster side to see what kind of needs there are that we can help meet in that department.
That's great. Thank you, Peter. I love that Samaritan's Purse is there. As Franklin Graham says, you're there long after the TV cameras are gone, and your public is got a very short memory, and we move on. But it's good to hear that you guys still, here we are months later, and you guys are just getting started on this, and the impact to the people. If anybody's interested, there's a lot of videos out on the Samaritan's Purse site. That when you hear these personal stories and the impact that Samaritan's Purse makes, not only on the 300 that have, plus that have accepted Christ, but just what it means to them in rebuilding their faith as they rebuild physically. So, with that, I want to transition over to Isabella. Isabella is on the human resources team at Samaritan's Purse. And I'd like to turn a little more to the personal aspect of this, Isabella. Maybe you could tell us about how you were brought into this team, because that may not be part of how you may not be part of the response usually. And what did you learn in this process?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I was not a traditional person to be helping out with GIS. I just recently joined the ministry about 6 months ago. In HR, I work on our staff engagement team, which is similar to a lot of organizations' learning and development teams. Um, but in the past, last summer, I had interned with Michael's team, and not primarily with GIS, but I did help out a little bit on a GIS project. And so after the disaster hit, there were a couple of days where we were out as staff, just out in the field, helping with mud outs and things, learning how to do different jobs. And then a couple of days in, Michael called me and was like, "Hey, we need some more people with GIS. Do you have availability to come help?" And so I switched over and worked for IT for a week. um, and so I learned a lot, even just about GIS, because I had done one project in the past and worked more kind of on the background with coding and things. And so it was very different for me to be looking at just all of the sources that we're getting information from, all of the ways that information can be displayed through GIS. And so it was a lot of just learning for me about the value of GIS and how it can be helpful in disaster response.
Okay, great. Thank you, Isabella. Thanks for jumping in and rolling up the sleeves when all hands on deck were needed. Um, what do you feel like that was the biggest impact for you and the accomplishment in this process?
I think hopefully the thing that's been the most helpful has been I was tasked with pulling together a lot of maps and apps and data that we had and that other sources had, and just putting them all on one site. And so that was the project that took up most of my time, but that was really cool to be able to pull together all the things and kind of have this central hub where our people could go to see the most relevant data for the response.
Yeah, that's great. I think it's great to see that for in the forefront. People want to know what's going on. They want to know how they can help, and when they can see that those maps and those images, backed by the data, I think it's really powerful way to communicate what's happening and what the response is, and then hopefully how they can help. Um, let's see. I do see we have a question from Stephanie. I appreciate the question, Stephanie. We are going to get to questions. We are going to open this up. So anybody, if you have questions, please feel free to put them into the chat, and we'll go through those in a minute. We do have a few other folks that we do want to hear from here. Um,
I can
let's see.
certainly
Yeah.
answer some of the questions if you want, Mark. I don't know. I haven't really looked at the audience. I don't know if anybody else from projects is here now. Is anybody from projects here on the call?
I don't see Tim, Joel, or Jack.
Yeah, they're probably in the middle, and I can explain why too. And it's kind of it's very pertinent to what we're talking about here.
Go ahead, Michael. Maybe it's a good time to
Yeah. So just yesterday, we got a note from projects that they're going to need some extra support. They have what they're calling spun up their response 2.0 for Hurricane Helene. And Peter, maybe you can provide some insight here too. I think that we still have a number of work orders that haven't been fulfilled, and it was decided that projects would bring in what's called a DART team, or Disaster Assistance Response Team, which is a highly trained team that is on call at all times. They're not regular staff, but they are vetted folks that have decided to volunteer with us and are ready on an on-call basis. So I think we have 100 DART members that are joining us either today or tomorrow to start working on what is left as far as work orders or whatever needs are out there. So maybe give me some more context, because I don't know it at this point. Peter, do you know?
Yeah, I think one of their primary focuses with this being in our backyard. So just for kind of, it may have been said earlier, I don't remember, but Watauga County, which was our largest of those three Western North Carolina responses, is home to Boone, and Boone is home to Samaritans Purse's international headquarters. And so that was kind of part of the ground zero of this whole event. And so it being very much in our own backyard, it gives us an opportunity, perhaps even a responsibility to look into ways we can help that kind of go beyond um, our normal. So our normal for response in North America is we're going to do that disaster relief phase, and maybe we'll move into the rebuild phase. So these folks are going to go out, they're going to canvass, they're going to look for just what the needs are, and try to see how the ministry can help meet needs of families that are still very much hurting in Western North Carolina. It's going to be a long recovery process, um, and so that's what I know about what that team is going to be working on. Is just assessing needs and seeing what the opportunities are for us to continue to meet some of those needs and bless our neighbors here.
That's great, Peter. Thanks. Maybe maybe we have a part 2 of this webinar later on. It'd be great to hear how this story kind of unfolds. And just as a reminder to everyone, we do webinars. We try and do them every month. That's our goal. But typically, we break for the summer, so we typically do about 8 webinars a year. We already are planned out through June, but maybe that'd actually be a good time frame after that. Later this year to hear back again, and maybe we'll hear from Joel and and the team on this.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh yeah, no problem, Mark. I don't want to cut in, but I don't know if you can still see the map on the screen now. But
Yes,
the little blue dots are actually all of the work orders and I'm zoomed in pretty tightly here to Boone. So this is the Boone area right here, kind of centrally known by this little I don't know what you call it, little peanut here area, and so our headquarters is right here where the cross is. That's our logo, of course. And so if I zoom out, you can see that the work orders are just all, well, if I zoom out too far, you're not going to see them because there's so many of them, but there you go. There's the concentration of work orders. Each of those is just a dot. So I didn't even put in like a concentration heat map at all, but yeah, that's how many there are. So tons of work orders. And if I go over, I didn't want to do that.
For context to that, across all of our Helene responses, we had well over 10,000 requests for help. Some of those end up being things that are out of scope for us that aren't suitable for volunteers to be able to work on. So we're not necessarily going to end up with 10,000 completed, but just on the North American Ministry side, we had well over 10,000 requests for help as part of this response.
that is amazing. So when we hear about 32,000 volunteers, that's phenomenal. But when you think about the need with the 10,000 projects, that's really still, there's more people that can come and help in this next wave, I think. And that's one of the things Samaritan's Purse does. You'll see that on the website. By the way, there's links in the chat. You can go to these places, Samaritan's Purse, if you want to help, if you want to give financially, if you're not able to travel. One of my ex-pastors actually has a ministry that's gone out and was actually out responding here. He was on a chainsaw team, and they're going to be looking at going again. So there are ways that you can help even now if you want to go out physically and volunteer, or if you want to give to the ministry. I do want to make sure we get some time for Stephanie, but Michael, you pulled up this dashboard. Maybe you can kind of just explain what this is, and maybe what are some of the kind of the key things that might pop out on this dashboard for people.
Yeah. So Peter was talking about the 10,000 work orders, and it's really pretty tiny down here, but the total work orders down here at 10,900. So it's almost 11,000 work orders. This dashboard has kind of gone into maintenance, a non-maintenance mode. It's not being utilized at this point because the transition is happening where we had 6 different disaster response areas. You saw those in those polygons, and you can kind of see them in the main map here. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 2 in Florida, 1 in, or is it 3 in Florida? I can't remember. I guess it's 3 in Florida, 1 in Georgia, and 3 in Western North Carolina, East Tennessee. So each one of those, and I don't think Peter emphasized that, each one of those, at least I believe this is true, Peter, correct me if I'm wrong, has a 18-wheeler disaster response unit there as the headquarters, basically, or the what would you call it? The
Kind of
command
a mobile
center, I guess.
command, yeah.
Yeah, command center. So is that true, Peter? All of these sites have their own disaster response unit there?
That's correct. It's got an office up front and tools and equipment to outfit those volunteers that come in: chainsaws, tarps, hand tools, power tools, generators, kind of an all of the above rolling shop for us.
Yeah, if you take a look at some of those videos that are being shared in the chat, or at least to the links, and then you can get to the videos, you'll see a disaster response unit. The one here in the Boone area as at a local church, and there's a Billy Graham Evangelistic Association truck there too, which is their command center. So again, we're working side by side with them. So it's pretty interesting. A lot of times we have what are called lighthouse churches. Is that right, Peter? Are those the ones that have people stay at the churches? Is that a lighthouse church, or is it something else?
That'd be our host churches
Host churches,
directly.
thank you,
So
yeah.
we partner with a local church. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Michael, how would this dashboard be used internally within Samaritan's Purse? I don't know if it's shared externally, but how would this be used? Maybe just one or two examples.
Yeah. So actually, this is experimental. We haven't done a lot of this, and so this was sort of something that we spun up and a little bit different, because usually we only have one disaster response unit per response, but here we have 6. So the way I was hoping this would be utilized, and I don't think it was, Peter can clarify on this, but just to get a really kind of the finger in the wind understanding of how much is left as far as what needs to be done work order wise, how much has been done by us, how much has been done by others. We do try to keep track of that, and really getting a running total to help organize folks and help them understand, hey, maybe we need to market this one area a little bit more on our website and say we need more volunteers because our volunteer numbers are going down, our work orders are still going up. We're still, I think, getting work orders submitted. Peter, clarify if I'm wrong there. But yeah, that was the hope for this. I'm not sure it ever fulfilled that mission, but that was definitely the reason that we put it together. I had Stephanie, who unfortunately has a flu today, put this together, and she did a great job, as you can see. And the salvations, I think, is now, Peter's saying there's 300 plus, so this is off too. So all the connections and everything that I used to have are sort of gone, and it's pretty much retired. But I wanted to show you this just as an example. And I really wanted to use this as a springboard for talking about these kinds of dashboards for NAM. And yeah, I'm leaving that up to Peter as much as possible, but I don't want to speak for him. But maybe you could put in your 2 cents too, Peter, on the use of this or the non-use and what might be the future for it.
Yeah, I think with something like this, one of our biggest challenges is so many roles were temporarily upended. We got to borrow Isabel for a little while on the GIS stuff, and like Michael said, there was a point in time where we had the employees got an email and a text basically saying, your direction for tomorrow is to show up at Alliance Bible Fellowship in Boone, and we'll give you an orange shirt and put you to work. So just complete upending of what might be considered normal, right? And so the challenge that we faced was introducing something new like this when everyone was already stretched so thin. We had teams here working 12-hour days for weeks on end just to keep up with volunteer scheduling and supporting our folks in the field. Obviously, the folks in the field are working overtime all the time, and so I'd say that's a challenge with especially with any response, but especially response as big as this one, and part of the reason that we just weren't able to maybe use some new tools that could have been helpful, but certainly we'll want to look at in the future. As things have started to settle down.
Yeah, no, thank you, Peter. And I think to this point, I appreciate this as a prototype, but the dashboards rely on the data. So this is actually a good segue into, I want to turn over to Stephanie, because Stephanie actually had to be one of those people that had to change her hats, change her roles very quickly, and helped with the data enablement. So Stephanie, maybe you can tell us what's your day job at Samaritan's Purse, and then how did you get pulled into a different temporary role to support this GIS effort in response to Hurricane Helene and Tropical Storm Helene?
I think we have two Stephanies, maybe one that you think is the Stephanie that
Aha.
works here. It's Stephanie Diekman. I don't think she made it because she's got the flu today. I have a much lower voice than Stephanie, but I can try to answer Mark's question.
Okay.
Yeah, so Stephanie is actually in the data enablement team, and that means that she's mainly working with Tableau. She's actually our Tableau expert. But she did have some GIS experience. I kind of helped her with some projects that she had that were geospatial in nature, and so she had some understanding. So again, she was one of those folks that when that call came for us to report to the Bible Alliance Bible Fellowship Church, in an orange shirt, I said, I don't think that's going to be the best use for the GIS folks. So I pulled some people back and said, let's do this instead of that, and that'll be our volunteer role. So I pulled Stephanie into that, and she developed this dashboard, like I said, but her role was quite different. She's done many a dashboard, believe me, in Tableau. That's pretty much what you're doing, right? So I threw her at this, and she struggled. I know she did, but I know eventually she got over the hump and really did a great job. It just took her time, like it does on any GIS project when you're new, is to kind of wrap your mind around what's the data source, what am I trying to accomplish here, what am I trying to communicate, and getting it done, with the tools that are available. And she did. So many kudos to her. I hope that she listens to this recording because she did a great job, and I really appreciate her doing this because, again, this was a demonstration project. So it really wasn't going to be anything necessarily that folks were going to use, but she dove head first and really made it happen. So I do appreciate that. I do want to also say that I totally appreciate Isabella for coming in and helping. Again, she said she didn't have a lot of GIS experience, but man, she picked it up like that and just did a great job. So again, many kudos to them. Thank you. And did I answer the question?
Yeah. No, I think that's great, and I think I will switch over to Stephanie. So first of all, I think the dashboard is amazing. It's you can see all these big numbers, number of people impacted, number of volunteers, number of work requests. And the end of the day, I love that the biggest number that you made there is in the lower right with the number of salvations. And I know you've got to update that with the data, but I think this is an amazing way to synthesize with a lot of things that are going on in the moment and be able to extract value and help be able to drive decision making. So I think that's amazing. With that, I want to switch over to Stephanie Shaw, the other Stephanie. She had a question, so we're going to switch over to our kind of Q&A here and from the audience. So Stephanie's question is, what GIS-related data and mapping applications do you get ready before a disaster event? And what data do you collect throughout the process? For example, do you track locations of volunteers, feeding centers, areas visited, other disaster teams not from Samaritan's Purse?
Yeah, those are all great questions. I appreciate it. I'm going to throw it over to Peter, actually, and he can answer most of it, and I'll pick up whatever he doesn't answer. Did you hear the question, Peter? You good?
Yeah. I'll caveat this answer with I'm going to talk from the North American Ministries side. That's what I know. If we do get the chance, I like your idea, Mark, of doing a 2.0 because a lot of the really cool GIS work that happened with this response was done by Tim and Joel and our projects team, and they did some really cool stuff that I think y'all would love to see.
Yeah.
So they'd have a lot of they'd have more of an answer to this question, but we have some basic standard stuff on the U.S. disaster relief side. We have what we call our disaster asset viewer, which just shows our key volunteers. We have box trucks that we pre-position at churches around the country to allow them to work on local projects, but then they've agreed to get them wherever we need them within 24 hours and provide drivers for that. And so it shows our box trucks, become disaster response vehicles, our key volunteers, the team leaders, assessors, cooks, heavy equipment folks, their locations in relation to our offices, to hurricane tracks. And so all kind of just a master map showing those assets, those resources that we're able to draw on as part of a response. So that's always there. That's always available. We're always updating it as new information comes. We have some others too. Often with a hurricane event, Michael helps us out with some analysis on impacted areas and different things like that. We'll often create specific apps or dashboards tracking that storm. In terms of data collection, I know Stephanie asked about that. We're not necessarily on the U.S. disaster relief side using tools like Survey 123 to actively collect and feedback. We have resources that are collecting our work order data, and then the maps are updated from those kind of master resources. I think that across the ministry, we do use Survey 123 for some things, but on the North American side, it's not something that my team's involved in generally.
Yeah, no, that's great. So let's see. So a couple things I'm thinking here is I've helped. Some of you know I work at Esri. I helped with our pastor and his ministry local that went out and responded to Samaritan's Purse. I armed them with a lot of information that it had also been shared with Michael Bishop. So we have a disaster response program here at Esri that will help any group here that if you're facing a disaster, you reach out to us for any resources. We don't want you to be resource bearer in a disaster. And so I helped our pastor with a lot of GIS maps and apps and data to help them for their mission going out there. I know Michael did that on a much grander scale across Samaritan's Purse. Michael, do you want to talk about some of the maps and data that you prepared to support this effort?
Yeah, and I think Peter's right that we should get projects involved because, and just a little sidelight for them, if I can. So what's interesting again with projects is they're international disaster relief, which means that they, of course, handle any kind of disaster, whether it's human-induced or natural disaster that happens internationally. But because this was such a large-scale event, it was decided that projects was brought into this domestic relief. And so what was their part? Well, their part was really more of how can we supply the things that are needed, like generators and tarps and various things like that. How can we get those to people as quickly as possible, and so that's what they jumped into. And in fact, because the areas were very cut off, you can see I threw up this map that shows one of the bridges that was taken out by the storm. That was indicative of all these areas that were cut off, and so it was deemed that we would team with the U.S. National Guard and use their Chinook helicopters to supply these areas that were cut off with generators and food and tarps and heaters and tents and whatever they needed. And that was really what projects did. And so a lot of the maps and apps were developed by them. I didn't do a lot of that, and so I could probably find them, but I don't think we have enough time to do that. So I think a 2.0 would be worthy of this, because it was really interesting. One of the things that I remember projects did is they went up in the UEs and they took pictures, geo-reference pictures of all of the really bad hit areas. So we have a really good catalog of, right after the disaster, we're talking a few days after the disaster, of some of these aftermaths of, buildings being torn out and bridges down and all that kind of stuff, and landslides and whatever else. But I did not develop a lot. I really was working with that team of two, Stephanie and Isabella, to develop the hub site and then also the dashboard. So really trying to help with that effort. And so you've pretty much seen what I developed. I do, like Peter said, help sometimes with some analytic stuff, like what's the height of floodwaters to particular structures, how many residential structures were hit. We often want to look at the demographics, especially when it comes to those below the poverty line or at the poverty line. We want to know where those places are at, because we're going to respond to those places more so than, say, the rich areas. Anyway, so that hopefully answers it for you, Mark. Not much to show other than what I've got on the screen right now. And again, big kudos to Isabella for putting up the hub site. I don't have it up right now, Yeah, I could try to find it when you ask a couple questions to Peter, but
Yeah, I think we'll have to definitely do a 2.0.
yeah,
I'm putting some links into the chat right now. We are running out of time, so I do just want to
yeah,
kind of summarize, and we obviously have so much more to talk about here. There are many ways you can help here, so please take a look at the chat, and think and prayerfully consider how you might think about supporting the great work of Samaritan's Purse. They can only do this with volunteers, and also with prayerful support. Your prayers and your giving. So think about that as you think about your year-end giving. And with that, maybe I'll just go around, and any last thoughts, Michael and Peter.
yeah. Sure. I'll just say thank you, everyone, for the support that you provided. I'm sure many of you have prayed for us and for just the people that are affected. Continue to pray. There's people actually out there that are still living in tents, need heat. This is the winter time in the high country, and it's going to get super cold this weekend. It's going to be in the teens this weekend. So pray for those people that we can get to them and really meet those needs through that DART team and try to get trailers to them. You know, FEMA has provided some trailers, but we uh, we have enough dollars now where we can provide some too. So I think we'd like to do that. So continue to pray for us. This isn't going away anytime soon. Roads are still impassable in places, and so there's just a lot of work that needs to be done. And it's definitely not in the news, but we appreciate and covet your prayers and any support that you want to give, whether you want to volunteer with North American Ministries or just send us money. Anything helps, really does, and we just appreciate it. So thank you.
So all those links are in the chat. You'll see quite a few links there, but one of them is a give link. So I'll be very frank and open there. Just you're welcome to give. There's ways you can help rebuild. There's all the information on the latest videos and photos if you want to see that Mike was talking about. What Michael was talking about, and I'm personally going to try and lead by example here. Michael and I are talking about me coming out in the March timeframe and maybe helping with how we might be able to continue with this GIS work at Samaritan's Purse. And I'm going to get to see firsthand what's going on there. So thank you all at Samaritan's Purse for what you do, not only in disaster response in the U.S., around the world, in Operation Christmas Child, and just all the ways that ultimately you guys are, doing this work in the name of Jesus, as Franklin Graham says. So all this is for the glory of Jesus, and for ultimately the people could come to know our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. So with that, I do want to reach out for some of you that may not be familiar with us. I'd like to invite you. This is one of many webinars and many things that we do at Christians in GIS. There's the website, and you can subscribe and be on our mailing list to get more information. We are open to anyone that wants to be involved, but you can also see, as long as you know that we're focused on being Christians in GIS, and the website tells you what that means. But all are welcome, and we look forward to future webinars. Thank you, Michael, for organizing this. Peter, thank you for all your work and for taking time to come on board and share what you're doing. And I think we definitely need to do a follow-up to this. So thank you all for your great work.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it. Thanks, Mark.
Oh, I missed one question. I'm sorry. I think we've got a few more minutes here. Let me get the
Yeah,
question from Mark. I apologize. Mark, where I've got to find it. He was asking about GIS core and crowdsourcing. I remember that. And yeah, there you go. Mark Johnson asked, along the lines of GIS core comment, do you do much crowdsourcing of GIS work? And you didn't miss that, Mark, but I will say before I give it to Michael, the Christians in GIS offered to help with gathering information and crowdsourcing information. I think in the midst of the craziness, we weren't able to do everything we might have been able to do, and which we understand, right? There's the haze of that. Michael, maybe you could talk about how did you use any kind of crowdsourcing, and how can we think about that in the future?
yeah, it's really interesting. So obviously, the emergency management divisions of each county in the affected areas stood up as best they could what they were doing. So I was trying to be as tight a communicator with them as possible. So they were providing road closure data, and that came sporadically and in different formats that were not the best, but we worked with what we could, especially with Johnson County and with Watauga County, which is our home county here. So that's a big part of it. I did try to, I think I communicated we wanted to try to outline what bridges might have been out by looking at the imagery and just finding bridges, but I don't think anything ever came of that. So there was always this desire, but I know an after action is really to try to figure out how to do that better. And GIS Core could help with that for sure. I understand that. I think Christians in GIS, the group, might be a little more super motivated to help. I don't know. But yeah, I think it's a worthy topic to talk about in a future webinar maybe, or just a future discussion topic. I know that OpenStreetMap, we do pull data from OpenStreetMap. So, one of the things that could have been done is, okay, let's find all of the bridges and locate them and put them in OpenStreetMap. And that would have been great, because that's a sort of a common repository of geospatial data. So yeah, I mean, all of that's in play and have been thought about. It's just we have to do our due diligence and figure out what we do better next time. Not to say that this is ever going to happen again. Pray that it doesn't. But one thing that we're noticing as an aside is natural disasters, especially in the United States and elsewhere, are becoming so large scale. As far as the geographic extents of it, that it's hard to wrap your mind around. So having a geospatial really perspective helps in that, and big time. And then really, where do we get the data from? Data comes in all kinds of shapes and forms. It's much better in North America than anywhere else. But having coordination with ESRI and the Disaster Response Program, the DRP, to get data from them. They're often getting data. Our federal government was flying imagery. So I attended imagery meetings with the federal government, online, just Zoom meetings. And so, it just came from many sources. The first place we turn, honestly, is the Disaster Response Program with ESRI, DRP. And then we might think about other sources after that. But our local emergency management departments were pretty good with sharing, and we seem to coordinate. And ESRI is the common platform, so that's pretty common. Anyway, I hope you didn't. Yeah.
Thank you, Michael. I think we've just got a couple more minutes. We have one more question from Brad Fisher. Does Samaritan's Purse have a weather office, and are you tracking real-time impacts of the area? And Michael, maybe you talk about not only the weather, but just your whole emergency response and your security team and how you look out for the whole situation.
Yeah, the aside with the global security team, we actually have a red phone, the infamous red phone that anybody can call, and we do have that. So any of our groups, they're carrying satellite phones for the most part, and also GPS units, so that we know where they're at. And if they need to be extracted because they're in a dangerous situation, we will extract them. We'll find a way through our Mission Aviation Services, which is our own, similar to Mission Aviation Fellowship, often confused, but we have our own air fleet. And so we can fly and get people out of those situations. That's a big thing. Weather apps are a big deal. I'll let Peter talk about some of how they do that. It's a little old school right now, but we are trying to transition to more of a modern approach in that. That's one of our goals for the future. But Peter, if you want to address how we do the weather watching kind of thing, that would be great.
Yeah, we probably just got one more minute here, Peter.
Got it. Yeah, we have some dashboards that our folks use. We have a kind of an on-call, well, not on-call, but a rotating team. It's the same team that goes out when these storms happen, and one of them will lead each response. That team is also responsible for watching the weather. So whoever's not on deck to go out next, they're monitoring, they're watching, giving real-time updates to our department and ministry leadership. So that's our model. We don't necessarily have like a 5 meteorologists on staff or something, but we do have a team that they've been doing this for a while. They know what to look for, and so that's the model we use right now, is rotating them.
That's great. Thank you, Peter and Michael. Thank you so much, and please give our thanks back to your colleagues that weren't able to make it, and we will plan on, I think, going forward here. Thank you to all of you for joining. Again, if you're interested in Christians and GIS, please go to the link and you can subscribe to be on the mailing list and get all the information and the updates on these webinars. Please go to Samaritan's Purse, prayerfully think about how you might give. to that work, either in hands-on, or if you're not able to do that, in prayer and in giving. So thank you, everyone. Thanks again to great applause for all of our presenters and all of your preparation. Thanks, everybody. You have a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year, and we will have another webinar. Be looking for it in January.
All right. Merry Christmas,
Merry
everybody.
Christmas.
Take care.
Merry Christmas.